welcome to our first ever Zoom virtual bonfire, which is of course our attempt to find yet another thing to do with Zoom, given that so many things cannot be done this year. And we said it would be totally unstructured, so it will be totally unstructured. The only thing I will say, if we get more than 8 people, which we'll see, then I'll break you into rooms because we feel that's probably too many. And then you will be on your own in your respective rooms. And there's no agenda, like we said. So I think let's just go around quickly to introduce everybody. And I will do so clockwise from my top left corner. So Annie, why don't you go?
Yes, thank you, Nathan. I'm Annie McGee Stinson. I reside just outside of Denver, Colorado in the United States. I am a proud steering committee member of the IORG group. I am an owner and managing partner of a learning and development firm called Intera Works. And we are in this space of performance, human performance and potential. We work globally with large corporate clients, and our work is related to, directly related to information overload. We help people create systems to manage information overload using Microsoft Outlook and Gmail. And so creating capacity so that people can focus on what matters most is really what we do. And really, really happy to see you all here. Hi. Good morning, Scott.
Good morning.
We are going around for introductions, and actually by the order I declared, it is my turn. So I'm Nathan, I live in Jerusalem. I'm a physicist, and I spent most of my career at Intel, where I ended up as principal engineer in charge of computing productivity. And that is where I was a co-founder of IORG in 2008, I guess, or 7. And in the past decade or so, I've left Intel and become my own boss. And I consult to companies about matters such as what we're talking about, we're supposed to be talking about here. I also do a good deal of startup mentoring and public speaking and whatever. So I'm having a good time, basically. And if you haven't gone to see it, you can Google me and go to my website. There's a lot of stuff that I wrote over the years about this subject. Martin.
I'm Marty Maggot, and I'm presently in Athens, Georgia, in the United States. Although my home is just north of Detroit, Michigan. And I was an industrial engineer for 10 years, and then I went into law and wound up as a federal judge, from which I retired in '99. And since then, I've been an amateur photo historian, and I'm here just because I'm interested in a whole lot of things.
Okay, so next on the list is Paul, and welcome Derek. Let's see that he can hear us welcoming him. He's connecting to audio. Just a sec. Okay, we will go beyond the 8 probably. Cool. Well, welcome Derek, and we are doing introductions here, and next is Paul.
Good morning, everybody. I'm actually located in Colombia, South America, Canadian, very close to Niagara Falls, where I'm originally from. I'm a performance consultant, part owner in a business that started up a year ago called ISA. We are and have launched a platform to help independent consultants around the globe to improve how they deliver their services to their clients. I'm mostly interested here because I believe that information overload is a major problem that independent consultants working with their clients need to help them overcome. Not only them, but not their clients, but themselves individually as well. So I've always been very interested in the organization. I've followed you. By the way, one interesting fact, for some reason, I get information overload when I get emails from the organization. I always get 2 of the same emails. I don't know if that happens to anybody else. Every time I get an email, it's always 2, the same email.
Maybe you're.
It's just to
already-
illustrate overload.
Yeah. Go
Okay.
ahead.
I'll make a note of looking into it. Send me, I have your email, so
Yeah.
we'll look into that. Okay, next is Ingrid.
Hi, so I'm Ingrid Pope. I am in the UK. So my past life was in corporate IT, so very familiar with large organizations and trying to not only stay sane, but also try and be effective and make good decisions when in that type of environment. And I now work as an executive coach, as Margie already said, as a mind declutterer. So I'm very interested in not only the information overload, that is a big part of it, but all the other stuff that we carry in our minds, be it all our inner chatter, our inner dialogue, stuff that gets in our way, but equally, what's the physical clutter that we have around us and what's our emotional clutter that we carry. So I'm really interested in all of that stuff that there is just too much of in the world, in our lives, in our heads, and that gets in the way from us just being really effective and functioning well and ultimately having satisfying lives.
Now we have Margie.
Hi,
Yes.
I'm Margie Kiesel. About 38 years in the corporate environment, 22 in accounting, and the balance in risk compliance and controls. And I joined IORG last May because, like Marty, I'm just interested in just about everything. And when I saw the call for a steering committee member, I just thought it was very interesting to get involved. I retired in August and from the full-time force, that is, but I've since gone back to work part-time as a consultant for risk controls and compliance for a health tech startup. And I've realized that through my curiosity and discovery, I've loaded myself up again. I'm now busier than I was when I was working full-time. So I'm taking Ingrid's coaching and tips to heart. Her article on who's in charge, I've been reminding myself of that. Like I'm sitting here with piles of paperwork and to-do lists, and I'm saying, how did this happen? And well, I'm the gatekeeper, so I have a lot to do in terms of finding that proper filtering and balance and uncluttering, the number of things that I get involved in.
Okay, thank you. Scott, let us hear you.
Yeah, good morning, all. Interesting fact, I'm a pharmacist by training, but practiced for only a year and been in sales and marketing and healthcare for a very long time. I'm close to Marty. I'm down in Alpharetta, Marty. And I grew up not too far from Niagara Falls. Paul, I was in central New York, down in Chemung County. I took the Effective Edge class, a year and a half ago, and kind of got caught up in how to better manage my incoming information. And professionally, I'm interested because most of my customers are physicians, surgeons, and they're overwhelmed with information. The medical clinical information is exploding. New therapies, new drugs, new tests. Diagnostic and otherwise, and I'm always looking for tips and tricks of things I might share with them, how they manage themselves in this world of information overload.
And Derek, we don't see you, by the way.
Hey, I'm just sitting in. I received an email and I signed up for the meeting. It looks like it might be something that could help out a bit. So I'm an engineer by profession, and essentially I've been doing this transition for being a home worker for about 3 years now, and I really like it. But one thing that I really notice about it is that it's you got to pay a lot of attention to your efficiency and how you do things. So decluttering your time management. So I think there's a science to this. So anything that helps me to be more effective, to be faster, more accurate, more productive, I'll spend a little bit of time on it.
Cool. Very well. So I guess with this, let me get this. Okay. With this, we are done with introductions, and it seems like we do have 8 people, which was the limit we set for whether we want to stay all together in one room or not, right? So what do you guys think? You want to stay all together?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's do that. Okay, nobody else is joining us, so this is us. And this is actually your meeting. I mean, anyone want to suggest something to talk about? Whatever, let's do it and see how this works. This is the first time we do it, and I'm very interested to see if it works well for us. I've seen it work well in some other domains, but let's try.
Nathan, if I can, I'll start with a question. How is it, for me personally, how is it do I or our group help the organization? What is it the organization is specifically looking for? How can we assist the organization? And what is the organization's strategic plans for the future? Are you looking to grow? What is it that the organization is looking to do?
That is a very interesting question, actually. We're probably trying to grapple with it from time to time ourselves, I would say. We have our charter, of course, which is to raise awareness of the problem of information overload and encourage solution development and so on. On the other hand, we are very constrained in terms of resources and the people involved. So we don't aim too high, I would say. Maybe we should. We collect information that we put on our website, as you've seen, and we do webinars and various events a few times a year usually. Back in the old days, we used to have face-to-face conferences actually in San Francisco, but that stopped. At some point, people just stopped traveling enough or being agreeable to invest in traveling, and we couldn't get a quorum for such a meeting, so we're doing it virtually. And we're recording various podcasts and putting them on our site and so on. In the near future, we are now working on developing a MOOC, so an free online course on information overload, kind of 101, basically the basics of the problem and how to deal with it. And we're in process of developing that. And in terms of involving the public, the way this works actually today is we are not a membership organization. We used to be in the beginning, and people would actually pay membership fees, and we would have a whole lot of bookkeeping around that. And we would charge them every year. At some point, we said, what the heck, we're going to stop charging people. We are going to live off a limited amount of sponsorships that we can get, and we are going to be a cause organization. And in that sense, we have our steering team, which usually has at a given point in time maybe 8 people in it that change slowly over time. And we're meeting regularly and deciding what to do and raise our events and so on. We're developing this course at this point. I'm happy to listen to ideas of how we could expand beyond that, given that we are 8 people that also have a day job. Ideas.
Okay.
And Paul, what I would add to that as one of the steering committee members is one of the things that I particularly appreciate about IORG and Nathan's leadership in particular is that it's a research-based organization. So you know, Derek asked the question, is there a science to information overload? And I believe there is, and I believe that, you know, we have some recommended solutions. But it is one of the things that I appreciate most about IORG is that it's neutral, research-based, so that, you know, our intent is to provide validated information around techniques, including the science of, you know, how the brain functions, so that people can, on their own, implement practices that help them to reduce information overload, as well as conceptually, you know, really challenging the culture of organizations that enable information overload. What is the infrastructure and culture of an organization that enables that?
Okay. Okay, that gives me a much clearer picture. And
I just had a
specifically,
couple
how could
comments.
we, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I thought you were done.
I was going to say specifically, how could organizations like ours help to get that message out there? Is there a strategic plan with the group on how you're looking to do that? Because in the last 20 years working with organizations, one of the biggest challenges that they are having is that their people are dealing with so much information. They're not able to focus on what really matters. So the same challenges that the group has talked about here, these organizations are having the same problem. Now imagine when you have 100 employees all dealing with that same challenge on a daily basis. I teach the Toyota production system to companies. So it's lean manufacturing. And basically there's two flows of information, flows of material. And frankly, one of the greatest sources of waste that organizations do not address is the flow of information and how that information is controlled. Let me give you one quick example. If you take Microsoft, you talked about Microsoft helping organizations to be more efficient in Microsoft. Well, here's a simple example, and I've never talked to them about it. Emails disrupt the individual's day. When emails come in, they disrupt the day. In many emails, there's no reason for those emails to be distributed throughout the day. Organizations should have a process in place that emails that are not a priority 1 or priority 2, whatever that priority system is, do not arrive during the day. Those emails arrive first thing in the morning. So the first thing the person does is goes through those emails, say, I want it, I don't want it, they deal with it. But the only emails that should be received on our computers are priority emails, or 1 or 2 a person has decided because action needs to be taken. But that's not being applied in any organization that I know of. And that is something that Microsoft could do to help businesses ensure that those emails are not being delivered when they should not be delivered. There's a quick step.
Well,
I belong to several organizations which have maybe hundreds of people belonging to them, and every day are whole bunches of emails sent out in areas that I'm interested in, and every individual who belongs can choose to receive their emails as they're written, as they're sent, or you could choose a daily digest so that when you, say, wake up in the morning, you can see all the emails that have been sent in the last 12 or 15 hours, which I do because nothing is particularly urgent for me since I'm retired and I can read these at my leisure. But on the other hand, my son works in IT and gets like hundreds of emails a day, and he apparently has no way to control the input to them. So I don't know, I find that the system of digests works well for me, but I don't know how it would work in the corporate world, where sometimes answers are required to come back very fast.
Yeah, one thing I would suggest, if you haven't seen it, Paul,
Yep.
there was an interview that Nathan and one of our steering committee members, Lele, did with a gentleman by the name of Luis. Is it Suarez, Nathan?
Yes, he is.
On the IORG site, which is a brilliant interview, which challenges the idea of email, period. And
Okay.
that's the direction I would go. Scott, you mentioned that you took the Effective Edge course, which is our course, which is the InterraWorks course for managing email. But in today, Luis's argument that email was designed for an age that is long past, and that email is based on a, linear sort of, who controls the email is the sender, not the receiver, that it limits visibility, it limits transparency, and puts the receiver into a very passive mode for managing workflow, which I agree with. Today, and especially in the virtual environment, the work from home environment, what we need to really be looking at are networked and collaborative and communicative or organizational structures that are not linear and are not siloed, but networked. And for that reason, Microsoft Teams is probably the better tool because it enables visibility, transparency, and the receiver, the person who goes to Microsoft Teams, can pull information down as opposed to being at the mercy of whoever's sending a message. So it puts the user back into control. But the important thing, I think, is to challenge the organizational structure that says, top-down and hierarchical based organizational structures, because that's reflected in the communication and information flow.
Well, to add to that, Ann, our team uses Teams. We mandated that email was no longer the form of communication for any of our team members unless it was an email that was being transferred from somebody outside of the organization, specifically for the reasons you talked about. And we ultimately have two goals. One is to eliminate emails wherever possible. But there's really two stages I see. The first stage is it's a process of continuous improvement. So that is to reduce emails with the ultimate goal of not having emails at all. But that's probably something that's more long-term. There was an organization out of France with 70,000 employees that mandated to eliminate emails. They, as an organization, have reduced emails by 60% across 70,000 people. And it's been huge in terms of the impact. It's probably one program I would suggest, if there was a way to help organizations, just starting with emails and how organizations should handle emails, could kickstart the revolution of eliminating information overload.
Yeah, I'd like to comment, by the way, on your idea that unimportant emails will be batched at the beginning of the day. Now, as you may know, I wrote a few years ago this ebook, The Definitive Guide to Information Overload Solutions, which had 162, I think, solutions in a nice taxonomy with details. And it's a free download from my website if you want it. But the point is, among the solutions was one that said, let's not provide the email on an ongoing basis. Let's batch it maybe a few times a day, which is something that I imagined. I mean, it doesn't exist as a solution. And the point is, what Paul is saying is, let's take that part and add to it some kind of classification engine that will know which are the important ones and which aren't, and will batch only the unimportant ones at the beginning of the day, which can be done in many ways. And there are many solutions that do that, but they are separate from the solution to batch them. There are many engines that try to prioritize your emails for you.
But I I understand the intent behind that, but I think the habit, the mindset that independent pieces of information are somehow valuable is what needs to be challenged. When we can work and Nathan, I've heard you say this yourself, work used to be fun, right? It used to be fun because we were working together and in a collaborative and networked environment, which we can replicate in the virtual environment. Solutions arise, amongst us. So when we can be creative and brainstorm together and go back and forth real time in a synchronous way, solutions arise amongst us. Email, whether it's batched or not, doesn't provide that collaborative aspect.
But let me ask a question though, Ann. You know, when you look at the companies, you've got the major organizations, and then you've got SMEs that make up most companies around the world. How easy do you think it would be for those organizations to make that immediate transition? Or would it be much simpler to have a process in place? It's just like getting back into health, is that you're taking a stepped approach to where you're weaning yourself off of whatever the addiction is, being emails. I mean, I would imagine it would be a very difficult challenge to get organizations to accept they stop using emails today. So my question is, what is the actual formal process that we would recommend to organizations? Here's stage one, here's stage two, because as they begin to see the benefits, it's like I said, getting into good shape. Once you start to take steps, you're feeling better, then you're prepared to take the big step and go from eating meat to becoming a vegan.
Yeah, I want to comment. The company in France is Atos Origin.
That is
And
correct.
actually
Yes.
had the guy in charge of that program come interview, or I think it was on a panel in one of our IO days. So maybe that's also on our site. And maybe we had him and Luis Suarez actually in the same interview or panel. But the point is, the way they did it is, first of all, they had a serious CEO. I mean, this guy, Breton, was actually, I think, Minister of Finance or something before that. So he was a kind of a serious guy. And he declared that he's going to get his company email free. The way he got it to be green in terms of the environment is going to get it green in terms of information. And he declared that he will take 3 years to do that. And he then assigned an entire department just to work on this subject. And they went group by group throughout his organization and analyzed what they use email for and developed alternatives. And every department that got to be email free got a certificate from the CEO in a big hoopla and so on. So basically the guy was willing to put his money where his mouth is. He didn't just decree that from now on, we're not going to use email. He made a huge effort and he was the CEO, which goes to Deming. If you remember Deming, the total quality guy, he used to say that he doesn't even come to consult in a company unless the CEO invites him in person, because if it isn't the CEO, it's guaranteed to fail, because a behavior change must come from the very top. And I have my theory about that, why that is, which goes to games theory, right? Because there's always, the reason people send so many emails is they're afraid if they will send fewer, somebody else will send more and will get more noticed. And it's a zero-sum game, which is the prisoner's dilemma, the classic tragedy of the commons, actually. And the only way to game the prisoner's dilemma is by changing the table of the stakes. And the only guy who can do that is the guy at the top. The CEO is saying that he is going to fire the head of any department when there's too much email in that department. Then the head of the department is going to make sure that there's going to be fewer emails, and it percolates down. So what I'm saying is, it's not an easy process. You don't have to tell people they don't want email. Nobody wants it. You need to actually change things from the top. That's my view.
I agree. It's not an easy process. And Paul, you asked the question, where do we start? I think we always start with awareness. So awareness of the cost and awareness of the benefit of doing it a different way. With respect, Nathan, I'd support what you're saying. It has to have buy-in from leadership, and it can also, it has to also come from, all levels of the organization. And without buy-in of leadership, it's going to be problematic to implement anything. But what needs to shift is not the behavior. What needs to shift is the mindset. The mindset needs to shift, right? And the way that we shift mindset, because here's what I've seen. I've been in this business for, probably 30 years. When we used to do, what was called the Effective Edge workshop, which we now do, with email and such, I used to work with people in paper. So the behavior was the same in paper. We collected paper, we collected voicemail, we collected, different kinds of information, but the behavior was the same. Why? Because the mindset was the same. And we just transferred that mindset from paper and voicemail and whatever, sticky notes to email. So if we can't shift the mindset, then, the type of information changes, but the behavior doesn't.
Right. Although, so let me tell you where I got that game theory idea from. I was talking to a friend of mine at Intel, and I said to him, wouldn't it be nice if I succeed in my mission and we're going to have lots less email and everybody's going to go home at 5 p.m. Wouldn't that be great? He says, are you crazy? If you take away their email, they're not going to go home at 5. They're going to do something else until 7 or 8 p.m. because, again, they're afraid that they won't get rewarded and so on. So that's what convinced me that the problem is in that level of the fears and the mistrust and what I call the dark side of information overload, which I've written about. So you're right, absolutely, we need to change the mindset, but we need the guys at the top to make it possible to safely change the mindset, I would say. Of course,
And
you go to the guys that, I'm sorry, you go to the guys at the top and you say, we have to eliminate this fear in the organization, which is another damning thing. And they say, what are you talking about? Here we have an open door policy. We're all brothers and sisters, right? So what are you going to tell them? But the truth is the fears are always there.
Yeah, I also feel that only looking at email is only looking at a tiny little part of the problem.
Okay.
Just trying to get rid of email isn't going to make any difference unless you look at the bigger picture. How does internal comms get done? Nathan, as you said, how do people get rewarded? How do they measure performance? How, all of this stuff. What's their data repository strategy? Where do they file information? As Scott was saying, who's kind of in the sales and marketing space, where do they file information from external parties? All of that stuff. So I feel like we're maybe asking the wrong question, or we're just trying to address the symptom when actually what we need to do is kind of address the entire structure and the culture and as you say, Annie, the mindset. There's a much bigger part of how an organization is run. And then also there'll be SMEs will work differently from large organizations. Every company will also have a slightly different way potentially of doing things and what's important to them. So it feels like we're really restrictive if we're only talking about email.
Very true. Actually, the companies I love best among my clients are those that come where the CEO comes and says, I figured out that our communication culture in this company is broken. And they mean usually email and effective meetings. And those are the best ones because it's true, it is the culture, and email and meetings feed off of each other. They exacerbate each other if they're broken. But not everybody says that. Some of them say, yeah, just give us, a 1-hour lecture to employees about email, and that's great. And of course, they achieve nothing, but if that's what they want.
Yeah, because we've also seen a lot, an explosion, of course, of tech, of types of platforms. So Teams, you mentioned, Annie. So there's Slack. There's all sorts of, SharePoint. All these different types of tools, which are meant to be great solutions for that transparency, for sharing information, for making sure everybody, you only have one version of the truth and one copy of everything, but email is still there. So what happens is these tools get implemented, which then people need to go and use in addition to email. And yeah, the ideal is that as a user, I go and pick the information that I need rather than being bombarded and at the mercy of everybody else who thinks they need to send me stuff that I need to process. But now if I'm working with, as an external consultant, and I work with 3, 5, 10 clients, and for each one of these, I have to go and access a different system. So that is then me on tech overload, and potentially, depending on how well organizations deploy tools and solutions like this, there's, again, in the sense of it's a broader problem than just email, because as individuals, we're having to, within a work context and a broader life context, having to do much more in a self-service fashion. And that creates such a huge mental load for us. We're not only talking information overload, we're talking just having to deal with or process mentally somehow, think, oh yeah, that was this website and that was that password and that username. And this multiplied by however much you want. And all of that creates a mental load, which is huge, which is in addition to simply processing information. So challenge.
Ingrid, you mentioned something that's important, and that is the ability for individuals to go get data when they want it, not just simply being bombarded. But for me, emails is just simply a symptom of a much larger problem. It is not the one thing that should be focused on. But my question is this. I've read a lot of the stuff with the organization, and I happen to be someone that focuses on getting stuff done, not just putting stuff out there. What is the formal system? So if I was to take the organization and all of the work that you've done, all of the data, what is the program with the specific plan starting from A to Z, something you had talked about, Nathan, that being you start from the top, because starting from the bottom is not going to work. So you start from the bottom. But what are these steps to free an organization of information overload? And in addition to that, what are the systems that they can pull in? For example, in your country, there happens to be an organization. I'm not suggesting that's the right organization. In the UK, by the way, I've been to the UK the last 4 years at events with partners we have there. But this one organization just focuses on helping email reduction. That's all they do. So it's a tools, and they have specific tools that companies can have. But what I'm looking to get is, please give me the plan and the structure that I can go into a small business and go 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, there's so much information out there, but that's not what these people need. These small businesses or businesses that tell me how to get it done. That's why we're in the consulting world. Tell me how to get it done. Help me do it. Demonstrate ways that I can make it happen. And then once I have the confidence in you, take over my company, get rid of this information overload problem. But there needs to be a structured system, just like Toyota Motor Company has a structured system and tools to become the most efficient. That's what I'm looking for, folks. I'm looking for what is that system that we can go out and deliver to these companies to be successful.
The magic bullet.
I have a question about
bullets.
That.
Some people need more than one.
Yeah. I have a question about implementing that. When I was a judge for the federal government, I was the chief judge, and I had 12 judges under me in Detroit, and Washington was always concerned about the productivity of the judges, and they sent. They always wanted more cases done, so they sent a consultant from. I don't know where he was from, but he was not a federal employee, and he would talk to me. He says, "Well, you do so many cases," and I always led the pack for some reason, and I don't know why. He says, "Why can't you get all of your judges to do as much as you can?" And my answer was, "Well, first of all, you guys picked those judges, not me. So part of the problem is you. But second of all, the people, the 12 other judges, were just a slice of humanity. And some of them were simply not able to do as much, or they did things in an old-fashioned way that they couldn't change their old habits. So what do you do about that in your lines of work, where you're dealing with huge companies and everybody is a slice of the population and not equal to everybody? What do you do when you guys say you're going to go in there and put in a system, but what if that raises problems with a whole lot of people? What do you do about it? Do you have counseling?
So going back to Paul's question, what's the structure for this? What is step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Paul, you let me know when you find that out, okay? Because
Okay.
yeah, I mean, me too. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Sorry to interrupt. Then I'd love nothing more than communicate back and forth with different ideas and suggestions for us to create a structured approach to eliminating information overload within companies. And
you
sorry,
got it, brother.
the issue with regards to the judge, here's what I heard. That approach was not an approach that would create a psychologically safe work environment for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And unless you're going to do change with individuals and within organizations where the people understand what is coming, you're always going to have those kind of problems that you just highlighted.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when they have lifetime appointments and
Oh,
and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
I have a rule. I don't work with government agencies ever. Period.
Actually, I
Refuse.
worked with judges.
You're just a chicken.
At some point, one senior judge in Israel actually brought me in to give regular workshops to the judges, like groups of judges. I guess once a year they go off to some workshopy week or something. And I would give them a workshop on, or a lecture more really, on information overload in general and in their context, which was not email at all. But they of course are overloaded by cases, but each case comes like with a cartload of paper, which is printed PDF documents or something, that they're supposed to know what's written in them, and they use sticky notes on them. I mean, it was pretty horrible, the suffering those guys were going through. So yeah, I can see how judges would have a problem. And I'll also comment on what the first thing you should probably do in coming to the organization. And I always first would interview the whoever is bringing me in, so the CEO or whatever. But then my next step would probably be to have them agree to run a study of what is broken in the communication culture, to characterize what doesn't work, why they're doing so many emails. Are they, in some companies, the emails are made by machines, right? Production machines on the shop floor, for instance. Are those needed? Can something else be done? And I interview employees and I try to formulate a kind of report about what I think is broken based on my experience. And then we need to have some kind of team that will look at all that and figure out what solutions they're willing to implement that together we think might work and that they're willing to do, because not everything they're willing to do, of course, which varies from place to place. But understanding the problem, I'm an engineer, right? So obviously, if something is broken, you want to understand what's broken, and then you can start trying to fix it.
Well, I'm going to go back to my earlier, what I asserted earlier, and address Martin and Paul. I think where it has to start is individual responsibility. So in our organization, we say individual, performance leads to organizational results. So if the individual isn't taking a personal responsibility in managing their own information overload, it becomes an imposition of any kind of system, right? The best that an organization can do at the organizational level, and I do agree that it happens with leadership, is to create a culture, create the conditions of safety. And I heard you say that, Paul. So if the organization creates a culture where it's safe, right, and we're not going back to risk reward kinds of performance measures, because risk and reward, by the way, as performance measures, doesn't work, right? If people are punished because they don't perform well, they stop performing. But if people are rewarded just because they perform well, guess what? They stop performing. So that's an outdated, outmoded form of performance. But individual responsibility and organizational safety culture, right? For people to be able to contribute based on intrinsic motivations and don't have to have their hands slapped if they don't, and don't get a doggy biscuit if they do.
If I could just take a step back for a minute, I wanted to comment on Paul's opening comments and questions, and ask for a little bit of help too. So we're trying to round up our community. What's the universe of people who follow our information? And we had multiple, the MailChimp distribution list on the web. We've got a IORG group on LinkedIn, and it's, just shy of 1,500 people. We're going to go cleanse that list, see if you're in there twice, Paul, and that's why you're getting 2 emails. I got 2 emails this month as well. After we cleanse the list, I'm working on a little survey. We want to go out and ask the people that we know that follow us because we have their emails, how can we better serve you? What are you interested in? What do you want to see? And that's, Paul, to your point, what's our strategic direction from here forward? I noticed being new to the team that an incredible amount of really good work was done to create the annual IORG Information Overload Day. And, we had a few dozen people tune in, so we're doing some good work, but how do we get it shared? How do we get it out there to more people? And how do we start leveraging people like you, Paul, who clearly have a lot of ideas and thoughts of what we could and should be doing? So, Paul, I would love to get your input. Doesn't have to be now on this bonfire, of what should that questionnaire say that we send out to our community, to help get that feedback of things we could and should be working on, and where do we go in the future?
It would sound like to me that your organization would look to create an army of individuals around the globe that believe passionately that the message that you're trying to get out there is critical. Because when you look at whether it be the environment or those other things, how do people have time to focus on these things with all of these things that they're dealing with? So information overload is probably one of the root causes of many things that are not getting done within organizations. So for me, there are ways that your organization can deliver a powerful message, but have groups that are passionate about getting it done. And by the way, that's for me what the focus is getting it done, helping business leaders to make it happen, to really change what they're doing. And I can tell you right now, there are a world of independent consultants that would love a program to be able to go out and help their clients with. Because it would not take much for any intelligent independent consultant to deliver a program of information overload. That's they're helping businesses. So with the right program, I guarantee you there are some amazing things could take place in a short period of time, but it comes down to what is that program? That's the critical part for me. What are the tools? What is the best approach to be used? And a lot of these things tie in. And are you familiar with the term poka-yoke?
I'm not.
Well, let me teach everybody a term called poka-yoke. It's Toyota Motor Company. And I agree with you, Ann, that it is critical to change culture, change the attitudes of people. And it's not only the senior leadership, but that employees must adopt their own personal responsibility. And that comes down to the message. However, one of the things that Toyota was wonderful at was they never focused on the people. They always focused on systems, because if you focus on systems, people will work to change systems. If you focus on the individuals being the problem, now you create an environment that's difficult. So let me give you an example. Poka-yoke would be about creating systems that prevent information overload from happening in the first place. It can't happen. For example, how many times do people get emails and the first button they hit every single darn time, excuse my French, well, I won't say it, is they hit reply all.
They do.
You have no idea how angry that makes me. I send a message back, please don't hit reply all. You know, you send out an email to 20 people and everyone sends a message back. Now you got 20 more emails on the subject matter. Oh, thanks for sharing. So this is what I mean by creating systems that prevent. So there's really two approaches: culture and the creation of systems that prevent information overload from happening in the first place. So.
And is that poka-yoke?
That's poka-yoke. Poka-yoke are fail-safe systems. Sorry, I didn't just actually give are fail-safe systems to prevent an error from happening in the first place. So it's error proofing. Let me give you an example. In England, the way in which plugs go into the wall, it can only go one way. You can't put those plugs in the wall the wrong way. That's poka-yoke.
You know something? So actually, at Intel, I had the plan to have this thingy running in the background, and whenever you send an email to too many people or reply or something, it pops a message that says, "Next time I'm going to wipe your hard disk." It didn't let me do that.
That's not poka-yoke, but that would be culture change.
Well, that's actually a
changing attitudes.
The thing is, what I did do is I did develop this tool that we call the Intel Email Effectiveness Coach, that basically ran in the background, and whenever you did any of about a dozen different errors, like forgetting your attachments, which later Google adopted, and like replying to too many people, and like a lot of things, I mean, really, then it would pop up a little alert and say, did you notice you did this? Maybe you want to fix it. We were very polite and careful because we still remember the fate of the Microsoft paperclip. But you could actually check, don't remind me in the future of this one. This was quite popular at Intel. And then there's a company in the Fiji Islands that developed it on its own and is selling it. So that is pretty fail-safe. I mean, it's what I used to call technology-assisted behavior change. So yeah,
there you go.
Behavior change, but we're going to keep an eye on you and we're going to remind you. They didn't let me electrify their chairs, unfortunately.
So Paul, in the example that you described about reply all or not doing reply all, does Toyota actually design their systems so that you cannot do reply all? Do they just delete that function from everyone's computer or what?
I don't know about that specifically, but what I can tell you in visiting the Toyota plants, one in Ontario that I visited not too long ago, 4,000 employees, they get 10,000 suggestions a year on improving performance. That's what you talk about, a culture of change, but it's just within them. But again, the focus is not the individual, it is about the systems that create the problem in the first place. And I forget who it was mentioning, all of these different platforms that are out there are designed to help. But when you have 8 and 9 different platforms within your company and you're trying to manage this, I'll give you one. The restaurant industry is inundated with all of these platforms, none of them speaking to each other. So the managers are having to log in to 7 different platforms to manage their time. There's an example.
Probably, yeah.
By the way, my apologies, Margie, if I didn't answer your question. At any point, if you want, just send me an email. I'll be happy to discuss with you the creation of the survey or
Yeah,
provide
I'll
some
take
input.
you up on that.
But don't
and
send
just
it
a
to
little-
all of us.
Yeah,
Little
just don't send it
tidbit.
to everybody.
Right, right. Well, 2 tidbits I want to share. One is IBM Lotus Notes. They did hide the reply to all button at one point. It was in like more, so it wasn't right there. You had to do 2 clicks to get to reply all, just so you'd stop and think.
I know.
And the other thing I wanted to mention is the health tech company startup that I recently started working for. They're dealing with the same thing in healthcare, information overload, lack of the ability to get the right information to the right person at the right time. And what they're trying to build is a platform using blockchain, hyperledger that would be interconnected, authenticated, and every doctor and patient could talk to one another, as authorized, and it would be the relationship of the payer payee. They think it's about a 20% business case of wasted administrative time within the medical profession. So we all go into the doctor's office and you get the clipboard with like 5 pages, you fill it out and you wonder if anyone ever reads it. I had blood tests done for one doctor. It was on not a public portal, but an electronic portal. My other doctor couldn't access it. You couldn't send it electronically because of HIPAA. So I had to print it out and hand deliver it to her. So this portal that they're working to develop and platform would allow all that information to be stored once, used by all, so that we can switch from reactive healthcare with a ton of administration to proactive and preventative. So, it's just a case in point when we talk about information overload. It's not just companies and emails, it's in everything. We're overloaded on health choices, as a matter of fact. You could Google any topic, is coffee good for me or it's not good for me? You know what I mean? You get millions of responses, in opposite conflicting directions. So many aspects to this information overload.
And also,
I just want to pay attention to the time and please continue. I unfortunately will have to drop off.
Actually,
I too will need to go.
Yeah.
So just to wrap up, I want to thank everybody so much for the opportunity to participate. I would absolutely love the opportunity to be part of the organization in some way, because for me, as it indicated, this is a major problem. My final words would be this. I don't know if any of you have actually seen the Netflix on the social media, video. If you have, it is absolutely wonderful. It is part of the problem. It really kind of highlights the things that we're talking about today. So everybody, thanks so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. And I have to leave too. Thank you. Glad to meet everybody.
Yeah, this is the part where I'm supposed to ask you for feedback and so on, but actually I'm pretty sure everybody had a great time. So maybe we'll do it again. So
thank you, Nathan. Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you for
Good. Everybody.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Ingrid. Thank you.